Picture this. It's 3 a.m., and somewhere in the glowing darkness of a bedroom, a phone screen illuminates a face twisted in concentration. Fingers dance frantically across glass, selecting not one, not two, but 17 different emojis to append to a simple goodnight message. A crying, laughing face, followed by a heart eyes emoji, then a fire symbol, a crown, some confetti, a few random fruits for good measure, and finally, because why not a dancing lady in a red dress, the message sends with a satisfying swoosh. Joining the digital symphony of a million other embellished communications pinging across the ether of our hyperconnected world, welcome to the age of emotional excess, where a simple yes feels naked without its entourage of thumbs-up signs, where happy birthday requires a parade of balloons, cakes, and party faces to feel complete, and where the humble period has been replaced by an arsenal of colorful symbols that would make ancient hieroglyphics seem minimalist by comparison. We live in an era where silence feels uncomfortable, restraint seems suspicious, saying exactly what you mean without visual garnish is considered almost rude. Now, imagine, if you will, the marble-carved face of Marcus Aurelius, that philosopher emperor, who once contemplated the nature of existence while managing the Roman Empire, slowly raising one perfectly sculpted eyebrow as he observes someone frantically searching through emoji categories to find the precise shade of yellow face that captures their current emotional state. Picture Seneca, who wrote extensively about the brevity of life and the importance of using time wisely. Watching someone spend 12 minutes crafting the perfect combination of symbols to express what could have been said in 3 simple words. Envision Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's greatest teachers of self-discipline. Witnessing a grown adult having an emotional breakdown because their carefully curated emoji message was met with horror of horrors. Response. The contrast is not merely amusing. It's profound. Here were individuals who faced plagues, wars, political upheaval, and personal tragedy with a kind of measured grace that seems almost alien to our current digital age. They lived by principles that elevated clarity of thought over emotional display, substance over style, and intentional communication over reactive expression. They believed that how we express ourselves reflects the state of our inner world, and that disciplined speech was both a symptom and a cause of a disciplined mind. The Stoics understood something we seem to have forgotten in our rush to digitize every fleeting emotion, that the power of communication lies not in its volume or decoration, but in its precision and purpose. They would likely view our emoji epidemic not as harmless fun, but as a symptom of deeper philosophical ailments, emotional impulsiveness, tension, addiction, and the decay of deliberate thought. Consider what Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, never intended for publication. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Yet we've convinced ourselves that we need an entire catalog of tiny pictures to convey our most basic thoughts and feelings. We've become like children who believe that coloring inside the lines requires every crayon in the box, when often the most powerful drawings use just a few carefully chosen strokes. The emperor philosopher would probably find our emoji habits fascinating from a psychological perspective. Here was a man who regularly examined his own thoughts and motivations with surgical precision, who believed that every action should be weighed against reason and virtue. What would he make of our tendency to react to messages within seconds, often before we've fully processed their meaning? Armed with an arsenal of emotional shortcuts that bypassed the careful consideration he deemed essential to wisdom, Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero and knew something about the corrupting influence of excess, would likely see our emoji overuse as another form of luxury that makes us soft. In his letters to his friend Lucilius, he often warned about the dangers of indulgence, whether in food, comfort, or even language itself. Nothing is enough for the man to whom enough is too little, he once wrote.
Oh, man.
How perfectly this applies to our digital age, where a simple congratulations feels insufficient without its parade of party hats, champagne bottles, and applause symbols. But perhaps most pointedly, Epictetus, who understood better than anyone what it meant to have limited control over external circumstances would see our emoji dependency as a fundamental misunderstanding of where true communication power lies. This was a man who taught that we cannot control how others perceive us, only how we present ourselves with integrity and authenticity. Yet we've created an entire secondary language designed specifically to manipulate perception, to ensure our messages land with precisely the emotional impact we intend. Imagine Epictetus receiving a modern text message. "Oh my God, that party was literally the best." His response, true to his teachings about the power of simplicity and self-discipline, might be a single period, not out of rudeness, but as a gentle reminder that when we feel compelled to shout, the most powerful response is often a whisper. That lone punctuation mark would say more about composure, confidence, and centered presence than all the dancing emojis in the digital universe. The Stoics believed deeply in what they called appropriate action, responding to situations with exactly the right amount of energy and attention they deserve, no more and no less. By this standard, most of our emoji usage would qualify as what they'd term inappropriate action, an over-response that reveals more about our inner anxiety than our outer joy. When we append 7 fire emojis to a picture of our lunch, we're not enhancing communication, we're betraying our desperate need for validation and attention. This isn't to say that Stoics were emotionless robots who never felt joy or excitement. Quite the contrary, they felt deeply, but expressed deliberately. Marcus Aurelius clearly loved his family, writing touching passages about his children and wife. Seneca maintained warm friendships that lasted decades. Epictetus inspired students, so profoundly that his teachings survived millennia. The difference was in their relationship to emotional expression. They saw feelings as internal experiences to be acknowledged and understood, not external performances to be amplified and broadcast. Consider how this applies to modern dating and relationships. We've created a bizarre economy where romantic interest is measured in emoji quantity rather than message quality. The person who sends "Good morning, beautiful" every single day somehow seems more caring than someone who occasionally sends a thoughtful, personalized message without any visual enhancement. But the Stoics would immediately recognize this as false currency. They understood that true affection reveals itself through consistency of character, reliability of presence, and depth of understanding, not through the frequency of heart-shaped symbols. Seneca wrote extensively about friendship, emphasizing that real connection comes from shared values and mutual respect, not from performative displays of emotion. He'd probably be bemused by our tendency to measure friendship by response, time to messages, and appropriate emoji reciprocation. The friend who takes 6 hours to respond but offers genuine support when needed would rank far higher in Stoic estimation than someone who immediately reacts to every story with the perfect combination of emojis, but disappears when actual help is required. There's also something deeply unstoic about our emoji. Anxiety, that modern phenomenon where we agonize over which symbols to use, worry about misinterpretation, or feel slighted when our carefully crafted emotional displays aren't met with equal enthusiasm. Marcus Aurelius spent considerable energy teaching himself not to be affected by others' opinions or reactions. Yet we've created a communication system that makes us constantly dependent on external validation. Every emoji choice becomes a small gamble with our self-esteem as collateral. The Stoics also valued precision in language as a reflection of precision in thought. Unclear communication, they believed, indicated unclear thinking. When we rely heavily on emojis, we often do so because we haven't taken the time to articulate our thoughts clearly. Instead of finding the exact words to convey our meaning, we throw visual confetti at our messages and hope the recipient somehow intuited our intention. This shortcuts the valuable process of translating internal experience into precise external expression. A skill the Stoics considered essential too, both self-understanding and effective living. Imagine Epictetus teaching a class on modern communication. He might present 2 messages. That presentation was really impressive versus, "Your presentation changed how I think about this topic, particularly your point about systematic versus intuitive decision-making." The first message feels more enthusiastic, but the second actually communicates specific value and demonstrates that the sender was paying attention. The Stoics would choose substance over style every time. This doesn't mean they'd be completely anti-emoji. The Stoics were pragmatists who adapted to their circumstances while maintaining their principles. They might appreciate emojis as efficient tools for conveying basic emotional context, similar to how tone of voice works in spoken conversation. A single smiley face to indicate friendliness, or a thumbs up to acknowledge receipt of information, these serve clear communicative functions. Without veering into excess, the issue isn't the tools themselves, but our relationship to them. When emoji use becomes compulsive rather than conscious, when we feel anxiety about proper emoji etiquette, or when we mistake symbolic enthusiasm for genuine connection, we've lost the Stoic path of intentional living. The wise person uses every available tool deliberately, not reactively. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the importance of seeing things as they really are, stripping away the stories and emotional projections we layer onto events. He'd probably encourage us to examine our emoji habits with similar clarity. Are we using these symbols to enhance genuine communication, or to manage how others perceive us? Are we expressing authentic emotion, or performing an emotional character we think others want to see? The honest answers to these questions would reveal much about our inner state. The emperor philosopher also emphasized the temporary nature of all things, including our own lives and the lives of those we love. From this perspective, spending precious moments of our brief existence selecting the perfect combination of digital symbols to express routine thoughts seems almost tragically wasteful. Time spent crafting the ideal emoji response is time not spent in genuine reflection, meaningful conversation, purposeful action. Seneca, who wrote eloquently about the art of living well with limited time, would probably suggest that we audit our daily emoji usage the same way we might audit our spending or eating habits. How much mental energy goes towards selecting, arranging, and worrying about these tiny pictures? How often do we delay sending messages while searching for visual enhancements? What might we accomplish if we redirected that attention toward more substantial pursuits? But perhaps the most profound Stoic insight about emoji overuse concerns what they called preferred indifference, external things that we naturally prefer but shouldn't depend on for our well-being. The Stoics taught that health is preferable to sickness, wealth to poverty, and recognition to obscurity, but that our happiness shouldn't depend on obtaining any of these things. Similarly, positive emoji responses might be preferable to negative ones, but the moment we start measuring our worth by others' digital reactions, we've given away our internal locus of control. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish clearly between what's up to us and what's not up to us. Our emoji choices are up to us. How others interpret and respond to them is not up to us. Yet we've created a communication culture that constantly conflates these categories, leading to unnecessary emotional turbulence over things entirely outside our control. The Stoics also understood that genuine confidence requires no external proof. A truly secure person doesn't need constant confirmation of their worth through likes, hearts, and laughing faces. They might enjoy positive feedback when it comes, but they don't depend on it for their sense of self. This is perhaps the most countercultural aspect of Stoic philosophy in our current age, the idea that we can be complete and content without constant external validation. Consider how different our digital interactions might be if we approach them from this centered place. Instead of carefully crafting messages to elicit specific responses, we might simply communicate what we genuinely think and feel without attachment to outcomes, instead of interpreting others' emoji choices as coded messages about our relationship. We might accept them as momentary expressions of their current state, instead of feeling pressured to match others' enthusiasm level in our responses. We might respond authentically from our own emotional reality. This brings us to perhaps the most practical Stoic teaching about modern communication: the power of restraint. Just as they practiced restraint in food, spending, and speech, they might counsel restraint in emoji usage. not because symbols are inherently bad, but because restraint builds self-discipline, and self-discipline builds character, and character determines the quality of our lives. Imagine the subtle power of someone who uses emojis sparingly and deliberately. When they do add a heart to a message, it carries weight because it's unusual. When they send an enthusiastic response, the recipient knows it's genuine because it's not their default mode. In a world of emotional inflation, the person who maintains a stable emotional currency becomes inherently more valuable and trustworthy. The Stoics would also recognize our emoji habits as a modern form of what they called impression management, the exhausting work of trying to control how others see us. They taught that this is not only impossible but also philosophically misguided. Our job is to act with virtue and integrity. Others' opinions are their responsibility, not ours. Every time we agonize over emoji selection to create the right impression, we're engaging in the futile attempt to control things outside our influence. Marcus Aurelius might suggest a daily practice before adding any emoji to a message, and ask, why am I including this? What am I trying to achieve? Am I expressing genuine emotion or managing others' perceptions? This moment of conscious choice transforms mindless habit into philosophical practice. Seneca, who wrote extensively about the value of solitude and reflection, might point out how emoji overuse reflects our broader discomfort with stillness and simplicity. We seem unable to let a simple statement stand on its own. Just as we struggle to sit quietly with our thoughts or enjoy experiences without immediately sharing them, the compulsion to embellish our communications mirrors our compulsion to fill every moment with stimulation and every silence with noise. The Stoics found tremendous peace in accepting things as they are, rather than constantly trying to improve, enhance, or optimize them. A message that says exactly what it means to say needs no decoration. A feeling that exists fully in the present moment needs no performance. A relationship built on genuine understanding and mutual respect needs no constant proof through symbolic displays. Yet in our current culture, such simplicity can feel almost aggressive. We've trained ourselves to interpret unadorned communication as cold or hostile. The person who says congratulations without any accompanying celebration, emojis might be perceived as insincere, even if their congratulations are heartfelt. A friend who responds, sounds good instead of sounds good, might seem distant or disengaged. We've created a system where emotional labor is measured in pixels, and authenticity is suspect without visual proof. The Stoics would see this as a collective delusion that we can choose to step outside of. They believed that the wise person acts according to their own principles, regardless of social pressure. If authentic communication feels strange to others, that's information about the culture, not about the wisdom of authenticity. The goal isn't to make everyone comfortable, it's to live with integrity and model a different way of being. This might mean being the person who sends fewer emojis, but writes more thoughtful messages. It might mean taking longer to respond because you're actually considering what you want to say, rather than reacting with the first symbols that come to mind. It might mean occasionally letting messages stand without any response at all when no response is needed. Something that would horrify our constantly connected culture, but would make perfect sense to someone like Epictetus, who understood that. Not every prompt requires a reaction. The Stoics also taught about the difference between pleasure and joy, between excitement and contentment. Emojis excel at conveying the former, but struggle with the latter. They're perfect for expressing momentary thrills, but inadequate for communicating deep satisfaction or quiet happiness. By relying too heavily on these tools, we might actually be training ourselves to prefer shallow emotions over profound ones, quick hits of validation over sustained well-being. In the end, Stoic approach to emoji usage would be like their approach to everything else: thoughtful, moderate, and purposeful. They wouldn't reject modern tools out of principle, but they wouldn't be enslaved by them either. They'd use whatever communication methods serve their goals of living virtuously and building meaningful relationships, while maintaining their independence from external validation and their commitment to authentic expression. The person who has internalized these lessons doesn't spend 20 minutes crafting the perfect response to a casual message. They don't feel anxious when they're carefully chosen. Emojis are met with minimal reaction. They don't measure their relationships by the enthusiasm level of digital exchanges. Instead, they communicate clearly, respond authentically, and trust that genuine connections will recognize and appreciate sincerity even without visual enhancement. Perhaps most importantly, they understand that in a world oversaturated with noise, symbols, and artificial stimulation, the person who can express themselves with calm, precision, and quiet confidence will always stand out. Not because they're trying to be different, but because they're being authentic in an age of performance. Not because they reject all modern tools, but because they use them consciously rather than compulsively. The ancient Stoics couldn't have imagined our current digital landscape, but their principles remain remarkably relevant. In a time when everyone is shouting with pictures, the person who speaks with clear words becomes impossible to ignore. In an age of emotional inflation, the person who expresses genuine feeling carries unique weight. In a culture obsessed with immediate reaction, the person who responds with thoughtful intention commands natural respect. This is the true power of applying ancient wisdom to modern challenges, not to retreat from contemporary life, but to engage with it from a place of centered purpose. The Stoics wouldn't tell us to abandon our phones or reject technological advancement. They'd remind us that every tool can serve wisdom or folly, and the choice always remains entirely up to us. So, the next time you find yourself reaching for that seventh fire emoji, consider the raised eyebrow of Marcus Aurelius. When you feel compelled to match someone else's symbolic enthusiasm, remember Seneca's teachings about the courage to be yourself? When you worry about how your emoji choices will be interpreted, recall Epictetus' wisdom about focusing only on what's truly under your control. The ancient philosophers offer us a path toward communication that's both more efficient and more authentic, if we have the wisdom to follow it.